Simmons, and today I'll be presenting epilepsy to you. Okay, why I chose this disease? I chose this disease because it's a very popular disease, and I mean everybody really knows about it and is very interested. And it's about 3.4 million people with epilepsy nationwide. It's 3 million in adults and 470,000 in children. And what is epilepsy? Epilepsy is a brain disorder that causes seizures, and seizures are physical changes in behavior that makes the body act in abnormal manners, and it sends abnormal electricity inside the brain. Cell communication is when cells have trouble communicating with each other. You have long distance and local distancing. Local distancing is when it is affecting cells but near each other, and long distance is when it's affecting targeted cells on other sides of the brain and stuff like that. And there are three stages. It's the three stages of the signal transduction pathway. You have the reception, transduction, and response. Epilepsy relates to this in the transduction, the signal transduction way. So here, these little dots are neurotransmitters, and this is before a seizure, and it's not that many in how it's recepting right here because these are two neurons. And here it's everywhere because there is too many coming out because of the electrical burst. So that's why epilepsy is considered a cell communication problem, and if that's the specific one it is considered. So the history. The Babylonians have the first recorded thing about epilepsy. They have it on something called a psychiku. It's a tablet where they put their stuff down, and the specific epilepsy was translated to psychiku miktu. It was called the falling disease. So after that, you have Hippocrates. He was a Greek physician and a father of medicine, and he had this quote that he said about epilepsy. He said, "I'm about to discuss the disease called sacred. It is not, in my opinion, any more divine or any more sacred than any other disease, but has a natural cause. The fact that the cause of the affection is the brain." And back then, most people did not believe him because they believed that diseases and stuff like that were caused by demons. Next, you have the ancient Greeks who used his works, and they helped figure out that people can either be born with the disease or it can develop later on in life. And they also discovered that certain diets will help people with epilepsy, which I will talk about that later on also. And John Hewlett Jackson basically laid the foundation for epileptology, and he wrote a book called The Study of Convulsions, which has all his scientific works. Okay. So the pathway and specific breakdown. Okay, so seizures happen when normal electrical patterns in the brain are disrupted by synchronized bursts of electrical energy that may affect the person's consciousness, movements, or sensations. The electrical patterns in the synapse, which is this right here, what I showed y'all earlier, in the synapse, the electrical synapse release chemical signals, which are the neurotransmitters, and the neurotransmitters travel to other neurons to create the signal, which is where that messes up. So, and where they come from. So here you have normal brain waves, and then they come from certain parts of the brain. Like you have focal or partial seizures, which come from one part of the brain, and it affects just this one side, and this could be like just like somebody staring off or like even twitching a little could be their seizure. But with these generalized seizures, it's affecting both hemispheres of the brain, and they're more severe, so it makes the whole body react and not just one part of the body. So, and then the brain waves. So this is also a picture of a neuron in the brain. So also in the brain waves, you have, with the electrical waves, you have this one is a normal neuron activity, and you saw how this one is going faster than the other one. That's the thing. Normal neurons send electricity rates at under 100 times per minute, but during a seizure, the neurons send electrical rates really fast, and sometimes even at 500 times per second. And we have the R20 chromosome, which is the chromosome that affects it. I have that right here, which will also be on the next slide. But the R20 chromosome is known to be the cause of epilepsy, since it has the deleted genetic material. And it curves into a ring. This is what causes epilepsy. So you have like millions of cells in your body. It's not in every single cell. So you can, it's in some cells, and that's how it does it. And this occurs early on in a pregnancy at random, so there isn't like a specific type of people who can and cannot get epilepsy because it is random. Like I said earlier, that it forms into the ring and it has deleted genetic material. Most of the common epilepsy genes were ion genes, which account for 28 of the 84 epileptic genes, that indicating that ion channels play an important role in epilepsy. So we have that the R20 chromosome is almost never inherited. Since it's at random events, like I said earlier, it will happen at the reproductive cells when they're made, like in the woman's body, or after once the baby is being formed in the belly in the embryonic stage. And this is known as mosaicism, which when a person has two or more genetically disorders in their family. Two or more genetically disordered sets of cells in their body. Like some have the disorder and some don't, all in one body. And most individuals affected have no history of it in their family, but there is at least one family that has been reported where the chromosome went from mother to daughter. Next we have the symptoms, which is basically, these are all different types of seizures that a person can have. Temporary confusion, just staring, being stiff. The one most people know is like jerking movements and loss of consciousness. Or it could be simple as fear, anxiety, or deja vu in the brain. It is affecting them. Treatments. So an accurate diagnosis of epilepsy is crucial for the treatment, because you have to know the type to know what type of treatment you can get. An electroencephalogram, which is this one right here, is the most common. It's where they attach electrodes onto the brain, and electrons record the electrical activity in the brain. And it is normal for a person with seizures to have not normal patterns in their brain, even when they're not having a seizure. So they can also do a neurological exam to test behavior, motor skills, and mental functions. They can do a blood sample to check for infections, genetic conditions, and other conditions. Medication, there's the anti-epileptic medication, which alters electricity in the neurons by affecting ion channels. And when I said earlier that researchers indicate that ion channels play an important role in epilepsy, so it affects the ion channels like sodium, potassium, calcium, and chloride, which we have this gene called SCN1A gene that provides instructions for making sodium genes. So that's one gene that is affected with epilepsy. And then another way that the medicine helps is by altering the chemical transmissions and affecting the neurotransmitters, so not doing this, basically what I talked about earlier. So it affects that. So it doesn't cure epilepsy. Nothing really cures epilepsy, but you have certain things that help decrease having a seizure, but there is no cure. And for some drugs that they have, the mode of action is unknown, so the specific mechanisms that cause epilepsy are mostly unknown, and the drugs with the specific mechanism of action directed at the underlying epileptic process, is which when they're having a seizure and stuff like that, has not been developed just yet. And diet. So there's something a lot of people do, like even with epilepsy, they have a ketone diet that they'll go on. And it helps with people with epilepsy because it breaks down the fat that is provided. And for children with epilepsy, being in ketosis helps control the seizures. the ketogenic diet reduces the amount of glutamate, which right here, these are glutamatergic synapses. These are glutamatergic synapses. So it reduces the amount of glutamate in the brain and enhances the synthesis for GABA, which lessens the ability of the nerve to receive, create, or send chemicals. So it's basically like the three things I told you about earlier, the signal transduction pathways. And there's also a seizure alert device. It doesn't really do anything but help people know when they're having a seizure like beforehand so like they can prepare, because I've seen like videos of people like they'll lay on the ground to make sure like they don't fall or hurt themselves and make sure everything is good. And last but not least, you can have a surgery, which also does not cure epilepsy, but it will help with seizures, and you will end up like maybe not having a seizure if you take the medicines afterwards too. So the epilepsy surgery is a procedure that removes an area from the brain where the seizure occurs. And epilepsy, the surgery is most effective when the seizures happen in one spot, but they're harder to do if it's like generalized seizures. Which also is another thing. You have these things called a TSC1 gene that is very common with people with epilepsy. The TSC1 gene is a gene that causes benign tumors. So it'll grow in the brain, and that'll also make them have seizures too because they mess up in the brain. And it's called tuberous sclerosis. That's another word that is called. Because TCS1 and TSC2 are two proteins that help control cell growth and division, and we know tumors are when cell growth is constant and they do not die. And that is all for me. These are my citations. I have a lot. And that is all.